Many Israelis we know have taken to the streets following this devastating news, calling on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to bring the remaining hostages home immediately. You're in Tel Aviv right now. What is the atmosphere like there now?
Tel Aviv is the site of the biggest protest, as was just mentioned. Protesters by the many hundreds, maybe thousands, blocked the highway. The atmosphere is one that has, of course, anguish over the deaths of these young people, and quite a few of these particular hostages have become well known. Their families were well known, so there is a sense of personal loss for a lot of people. But beyond that, there's just a very major political issue going on. It is striking how so much of the anger is directed seemingly more at the government of Israel than at Hamas. Now, of course, the murderers are Hamas, but Netanyahu stands accused by many people in Israel, probably by a majority of people in Israel, of having not done nearly enough to gain their release, of having prolonged the war artificially through various excuses because the war serves them politically. That is what his critics think. And there are reasons why they think this. It's not illogical. It's not unduly cynical. It is obviously horrible, if true. So what's happening is a tremendous amount of anger against the government. Pretty much every general that ever retired going on TV and claiming that Netanyahu's insistence on holding on to a strip of land called the Philadelphia Corridor, which is the Gaza-Egypt border, is not necessary for military means, for military purposes, and that this is the excuse he came up with to avoid a deal that would have returned these hostages. And in fact, the forensics show that the hostages were killed in the past 48 hours. It is especially devastating because that slots into the narrative I mentioned before. On Thursday, the government met and at Netanyahu's behest, agreed, had a vote and agreed that Israel must hold on to the Philadelphia corridor. This was against the wishes of the defense minister, who got into a shouting match with Netanyahu. Now, as Israelis are arguing over whether this was in any way acceptable, it turns out that quite possibly after that, these hostages were shot. So the whole storyline here is one that is leading to a very major political problem for Netanyahu.
Do you think it's fair to blame Netanyahu?
I do think that the Philadelphia corridor is an excuse, yes. Israel didn't even try to take it over for the first many months of the war. When Israel offered the deal that is currently on the table, and that was presented by President Biden on May 31st, it included a complete pullout from Gaza, also from the Philadelphia corridor, in exchange for all the hostages. When Israel first outlined its war aims, it was to remove Hamas from power in Gaza and to gain the return of the hostages, not to keep certain parts of Gaza. And moreover, the entire military establishment is practically on its hind legs, howling that they don't need the Philadelphia corridor, because if soldiers remain there, generals say they would be sitting ducks as they had been in the past. In short, Netanyahu is a little bit alone in making such an issue out of this and being willing to pay such a tremendous price in order to keep this strip of land less than a mile wide along the Gaza-Egypt border. It's not totally ridiculous because there was smuggling of arms from Egypt into Gaza, but the arms smuggling went through underground tunnels beneath the corridor, not on the corridor. So it's almost farcical how transparently problematic is the claim that they must hold on to it. And of course, the price Israel pays for not ending the war is just enormous. I mean, alongside the massive loss of life to Palestinians in Gaza, Israeli soldiers are being killed, the Israeli economy is being harmed, Israeli social cohesion is unraveling, Israel's international standing is really in the gutter. The Americans without whose support Israel cannot continue the war because they rely on the Americans for munitions and for an umbrella at the UN Security Council. The Americans want the war to end. It is really remarkable what a tightrope Netanyahu is walking. So I'm not a mind reader. I don't know if it's true that he is only doing this because he really fears the extreme right, ultranationalists bringing down his government, and he cares more about that than he does about everything I just mentioned. But I do know that that is the picture that emerges, and it must be very uncomfortable for the prime minister.